Good morning, everyone. We're going to give everybody a little bit of time here to come in. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I think we'll get started as I know there are a few people still shuffling in, but we'll go ahead and start start with our Intersect 2021. So welcome, everyone. My name is Jody Angelum. I'm the current COABE president. And so on behalf of COABE and the Workforce Task Force, I want to welcome you all to Intersect 2021. COABE is excited to sponsor this virtual symposium where over 1,000 educators and workforce professionals can connect to learn how to prepare students and workers for the demands of business in the ever-changing pandemic environment. We have a full day of breakout sessions where education and industry leaders will share promising practices around partnerships, leveraging the workforce and education systems to upskill the workforce, integration of immigrant and refugee populations, integrated and educational training programs, pre-apprenticeship, return on investment, and digital inclusion, as well as some other sessions. We hope to inform and shift the current thinking around collaborative approaches in upskilling the workforce. So together we can achieve economic recovery and an equitable workforce. Again, welcome. We hope you enjoy and engage in today's sessions throughout the Intersect 2021. And I'm going to turn it over to Sharon. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jody. It's such a pleasure to be with you all. I'm Sharon Bonney. I am the CEO for the Coalition on Adult Basic Education, and I want to give a shout out to our wonderful sponsors who made this possible. So this event is possible and it's free because of Essential Education. Thank you so much, Essential Ed, for your sponsorship. Dollar General Literacy Foundation, thank you for your sponsorship. Google, our partners there at Google, who have also contributed towards this, and of course, NGen. So I'm also going to shift over here and give a quick shout out to our wonderful partners. And before I go any further, I want to say Laurie Kierstead-Joseph, our chair for this wonderful symposium. She has been instrumental in bringing together and convening these partners. So National Governors Association, Tyson, World Ed, Pima Community College, National Skills Coalition, U.S. Chamber of Commerce, National Immigration Forum, and Full Capacity Marketing. We are so grateful for your partnership. So with that, I'd like to turn this over to Laurie Kierstead-Joseph, who is our workforce chair and also the chair of this symposium, who I believe is going to be introducing and talking about the vision for this symposium. Laurie, thank you for all of your work bringing this together. You have just done a phenomenal job, and I turn this over to you.
Thank you, Sharon, and thank you, Jody, for that introduction. Good morning, everybody. I couldn't be more excited to be here with all of you today for this event. As Sharon said, I serve as the Workforce Development Chair on the COABE board, and in my everyday life, I run an adult ed program here at Pima Community College in Tucson, Arizona. I wanted to start and just note what the goals of the workforce development team is. We really work together to help strengthen the capacity of the field of adult ed to develop partnerships and programming that will help adult learners access and succeed in family sustaining career pathways. And we aim to do this by building connections between stakeholders, by identifying and sharing best practices, and by raising awareness of the role that adult ed can play in workforce development. And as part of our work in the committee in 2022, we worked together with Sharon and Anson Green and others to launch the Behind Every Employer campaign, which seeks to strategically connect companies with educational leaders across the country to provide solutions for the workforce talent challenges that they face both today and will face in the future. Adult ed and career and technical education can be highly effective in preparing students for the world of work by teaching them contextualized workplace competencies, the competencies that are important for success in today's economic landscape. With this in mind, the COABE workforce development team and the COABE board dreamed up this idea of this workforce and education symposium with the goal of supporting adult education and workforce providers in developing strategies to partner together to increase the talent pool for workforce while satisfying the WIOA requirements for adult ed programs to help ensure that all learners find and fill the jobs that provide family sustaining wages. So the goal for today is that that our adult ed providers invited their partners and both in the workforce system and employer partners to the virtual table to participate in professional development and networking opportunities. This event was really designed to be intimate and interactive. Please use the chat throughout the day to ask questions and to comment and share information. We will do our best in all of the panels to surface those questions to our presenters. Before I hand this off to our Behind Every Employer folks to share a little more about that, I just want to thank the Workforce Development Committee, Jesse McCree, Karen Govan, Jeff Arnott, Stephanie Rittberger, with the support of Sharon Bonney and Lindsay at COABE, and the Intersect 2021 Planning Committee. Thank you, Sharon, for putting that up on the screen. Big thanks to Judy Mortrude, Amanda Bergson-Shilcock, Rachel Hirsch, Selena Shands from Full Capacity Marketing, Anson Green. Thank you all so much for all of your support in helping make today happen. That was it was a power team to get this going, and so thank you so much. With that, I think I'd like to hand it off to Anson to share. First I'll hand it off to Rachel Hirsch from the National Governors Association.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Laurie. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Really excited to be here. Just wanted to say a few words, having been honored to serve as a partner and advisor for the symposium over the past few months. I'm Rachel Hirsch. I'm a senior policy analyst on the post-secondary education team at the National Governors Association Center for Best Practices. I've been really lucky to work with COABE for quite some time, especially over the last year and a half or so on several projects related to reskilling, upskilling, and economic recovery. And I think one thing we can all agree on is that the pandemic certainly exacerbated inequities and gaps in our workforce and education systems, but the problems didn't start there. And I really hope that this symposium will offer a great opportunity for stakeholders across the spectrum, from educators to employers, practitioners, workforce leaders, policymakers, and more, to come together to consider ideas for how to improve our systems, practices, and programs through collaboration so that all workers, students, and businesses can achieve success. This work is so important, and we must ensure that adults with all types of backgrounds and circumstances are consistently included in the conversation. We hope you come away from the symposium energized and with ideas on actions you can take to continue to move this work forward in your home city, state, or wherever you work. I look forward to diving into this content with you all over the course of today, and thank you again to COABE for hosting this wonderful event.
Thanks so much, Rachel. We're going to now turn this over to Anson Green and Selena Shands.
All right, well, good morning, everybody, and I'm really excited about today. This has been a long time coming for us, working with COABE and working with a lot of partners. And I want to first say you are all about to take part in a very compelling set of panelists today, this morning, and then this afternoon, more sessions, some of the best content that you're going to find out there in the nation in terms of some really, really compelling intersections of adult education, workforce development, and employers. I am so excited about Behind Every Employer, this new initiative that we're launching. And I've been waiting a long time. I've been in adult education for over 25 years. All of it has been this interface of education, workforce development, and business. Starting from when I was teaching on the west side of San Antonio then working with big companies when I was at the state of Texas, state director of Texas, where we led the nation in serving 22% of all the workplace literacy projects in the country. And today, a big focus is about really increasing adult education's role in providing that resource to our employer community. We have a really dynamic labor market, and underskilled populations, the frontline workforce, the entry-level workforce, is where employers need help. And so today is all about how adult education can leverage its core competency, is really working with that frontline workforce, immigrant and refugee workforce, the underskilled, and really helping them do something dynamic with what they're doing in their lives, but also helping transform businesses. So I came to Sharon about this idea of really being more of a resource to businesses, and she came up with this brilliant response with Behind Every Employer. And so if we look and see what it's all about, it is really about getting to work on bridging this gap between the employers who desire fiercely sometimes to upskill their entry-level workforce. They're trying to retain that workforce. They want to grow that workforce. And then the adult education community that wants to increase their impact for employers and workers. This is way beyond WIOA measures and way beyond what we have to do in our grants and our local services, and more about really what we can do for our community in terms of building that workforce, building that tax base, and changing and transforming lives for the students that are in our classes and the workers that are working in our community. And this is adult ed's core competency, working with that underskilled population. In my role at Tyson, I'm personally doing this with over 50 adult education programs in 16 states. These are collaborations with a Fortune 100 company to try our best to find solutions that help retain that workforce and grow that workforce. And you can be doing that in your community too. So with Behind Every Employer, we're all about bringing together employers and making those connections and closing the gaps so we can see how much value each partner can bring to the table. And the gaps are simple to close, especially in our current labor market. Employers want to understand how to stabilize and lift their frontline workforce, and they're less interested in the intricacies of our work in terms of our grants and our performance measures, EFL gains, measurable skills gains, all those things that we love in adult education. Employers want to talk about what they need. And that's what today's all about, is really learning more from the employer lens. What does that look like? What can we do? How do we bridge that gap? I talk to a lot of adult educators and they just really don't know where to start. And today is where to start. Today are the sessions and the how-tos on how to get things going with a strategic start, a common language and techniques to help us bridge these gaps. We have a great website that we've launched for Behind Every Employer. Next slide. And this website is just fantastic in terms of, next please, being a resource for employers to go to and for the adult education community to go to about this interface. Nowhere has there been an organization and a national campaign to have this interface that is bringing adult education and employers together. Oftentimes we see this with community colleges, we see it with workforce development agencies, but never adult education, where we have this intimate interface of employer and adult education provider. So we have how-to guides on the website, best practices from employers and adult education providers, video testimonies, and a common business challenge that we get together on and can join and bring solutions to. And something that we're really launching today that we're so excited about is a locator map that we're going to be learning more about today and this morning. Next slide, please. So if we look in here, there's a lot of how-tos for what the business lens on this is all about. So a lot of times businesses, I hate to say this, but they don't even know adult education exists as an organization and as a resource. When I talk to businesses, they're like, we've never heard of that. What are you talking about? They get inundated by community college work and by workforce development, but adult education has been a treasure hiding in their communities. So we really even begin on Behind Every Employer to show through the website, how can businesses engage? whether it's through talent recruitment, advisory boards, internships, mentorships, apprenticeships, worksite tours, showing businesses, here's where to start. Here's how you can get this resource going. And so I want to talk a bit about the locator map, and then we'll hand it off to Selena to talk more about it. But this locator map is the promise that we've all been looking for, where an employer can just put in their zip code and find a solution provider, an adult education program in their local community. When I talk to businesses, that's almost the first thing I do. I find out where they're from, and then all of a sudden I'm searching online, struggling to find the local education provider in their local community. Now we're going to have a website where the business can go, put in a zip code, and find not only adult education, but workforce development programs through WIOA, talent recruitment resources, and community colleges that are providing workforce training. And what's awesome is this is a free resource to employers. So it really helps connect at no cost in a language that employers get and appreciate. So providers out there, schools that are out there, first off, you need to get on the map, because that's going to be the resource where your employer community is going to be directed. And if you're not on the map, you're not going to be part of that solution. So if you're an employer out there, what I can tell you is when you go to this resource and look on the map, those are going to be the mavericks in your area. Those are going to be the adult ed programs that are saying yes to business, yes to workforce development, and can really work on a solution for your workforce. So if you're not on there right now, you need to get on there. And if you can't find that employer in your business community, contact us, because we are the start of this, and we are kind of part of this national campaign that we really want to populate the map, get behind every employer going, and really move forward into the future, revisioning how we think of adult education.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Anson. Hi, everyone. Selena Shands here. I am the CEO and founder of Full Capacity Marketing. And first of all, Anson, just thank you so much for your leadership on this initiative. It's just been fantastic working with you, bringing the employer lens to the table and always keeping us on the straight and narrow. So I really appreciate your leadership. Our company are experts in workforce and education communications, and we've been very fortunate to have partnered with COABE on several campaigns, Educate and Elevate. Our latest one with COABE is Move Ahead with Adult Ed. And our job in partnering with COABE is for this particular campaign is to get people to the website, not just people, but specifically employers, to help them learn how to engage, as Anson was saying, and also to look up locator, from the locator map, the key mavericks, the providers in the area. And Sharon Bonnie just does such a great job at finding funding and scraping money together. And she actually got a $120,000 Google ad grant for the Move Ahead with Adult Ed campaign. And digital advertising is the way of the future in terms of outreach, especially after COVID. Really changed our worlds forever in terms of marketing and communications. And just that one grant alone has brought about 119,000 prospective adult learners to the Move Ahead with Adult Ed campaign. So we're going to take that same success there and mirror to get employers to this Move Ahead with Adult Ed website. So we really want you to make sure that you're on the locator map, and we're going to be sharing links. In fact, if you can go to the next slide, there are really 3 simple steps behind how you get on here and join the movement. To get on the locator map, you can go to Behind Every Employer, join the movement, and we'll be posting these links in the chat throughout the day. So there's a link there to get on the locator map. It's a simple form. And then secondly, you download the toolkit. We've created at Full Capacity Marketing a free toolkit that you can download, the logo to be a proud partner. It has strategies for being on LinkedIn, where most of your employers are at, and Twitter, which we're going to be using in the platform for advertising. So it's a way to build your brand to a local employers as a local campaign partner. So if you go to the next slide, the last thing I want to announce, and the reason that you want to be on the locator map, is that allows you then to apply for a Behind Every Employer incentive grant. Full Capacity Marketing and COABE have partnered together to fund a grant to accelerate any existing employer engagement promising practice that you may have going. And the grantee will receive over $15,000 in technical assistance and award monies to deploy a localized behind every employer outreach campaign to increase your reach, which is what it's all about. If we can't reach the employer market, we don't have opportunities for our job seekers. So this is super important. We're so excited to be a partner with COABE on this. And as part of the grant, you'll get your own tailored behind every employer recruitment page. You'll work with us on digital advertising, and we'll really elevate what you're doing in your local market as a promising practice. So thank you again to COABE for this partnership. I'll turn it back over to Sharon.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Selena. And I just want to give a shout out to Selena. As she mentioned, and as many of you know, we've worked with Full Capacity Marketing on 2 other initiatives, award-winning initiatives. One was Educate and Elevate the National Public Awareness Campaign, which helped stave off millions of dollars of funding cuts and helped add millions of dollars to the field for adult education. So many legislators have been reached through this. We were able to have almost 200,000 connections with legislators through this initiative. So I just want to give a shout out there, and also mention that this Move Ahead with Adult Ed Enrollment campaign has also been incredibly successful, and it's been through a partnership with Selena's Full Capacity Marketing firm. So thank you, Selena, for all of that. And now here we are, this Behind Every Employer campaign, which Anson Green really was behind this. He and I have worked together closely, and now we've partnered with Full Capacity Marketing as well for this incentive grant to support this important work. So I wanted to say, Anson, thank you for your wonderful leadership. It's been really a pleasure working with you and the other employers on the Behind Every Employer committee. And also, Selena, thank you for your work as well. So with this, I am going to now move forward and just say we are really excited about the keynote session, which is coming right up right after this. I want to mention we've had over 1,200 registrations for Intersect 2021. There has been a ton of excitement in the field, and we've also had a number of employers who have joined us too for this event. So really excited to kick this event off, a vision for a unified workforce system. And I'm going to now turn this over to Dr. Ian Rourke, who is going to be hosting the panel session. I'm going to ask all the panelists to turn their video on and unmute themselves. And I believe that Dr. Rourke will have you introduce yourself, but I'll turn this now over to Dr. Ian Rourke. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon, and good morning to all of the participants of COABE's Intersect. This is indeed a fantastic morning and a fantastic event, and it's just an honor and a privilege to be a part of the COABE community in planning for this session this morning, and to follow somebody such as Anson, with whom I've worked with in the past in the state of Texas, has just been a tremendous leader in workforce development, as well as my colleague and peer, Laurie Joseph, who has done an amazing job as the lead of the workforce committee in planning this event. Laurie asked me to give a few opening remarks before I introduce these fantastic panelists. So I'll give some opening remarks, and then we will go into the introduction of the panelists. And then we will have the panel itself, and finally, some question and answers if there are indeed time. And so Laurie will be monitoring the chat and really pulling out those key questions or nuggets of insight that the panelists will discuss at the very end. And my name is Ian Rourke, and I serve as the Vice President of Workforce Development and Strategic Partnerships for Pima Community College in Southern Arizona, and serving predominantly metropolitan Tucson, Arizona. When I was thinking about the challenge of this summit, and as well as this session, a vision for a unified workforce system, I really came down to something that's a passion of mine in my personal life. And that is these extraordinary sagas. And one of those is the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You may not be a comic book fan, you may not be watching all of the Marvel movies, but my family and I have watched every single one of them, start to finish, and some more than once. But if you're not a Marvel fan, think of Star Wars, think of Lord of the Rings, think of the Chronicles of Narnia, or any other great epic of our modern times, or even those in more ancient times. And there's really, really a key theme that is so simple, Yet sometimes we just miss those things that are simple and right underneath our very noses. And that is, for example, in Marvel, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, each and every single superhero has extraordinary powers and gifts. Each and every single superhero also has a fundamental flaw. And those extraordinary powers and gifts give them notoriety, give them power, give them prowess, give them the ability to take out extraordinary foes, the challenges of their time. But in each and every single circumstance, their fundamental flaw usually comes down to something related to ego. There was a colleague of mine the other day that said we need to really focus on building out ecosystems rather than ego systems. A key example in the Marvel Cinematic Universe is they are fighting unparalleled foes with also equally great superpowers, but these foes are using them for evil purposes. Two of the greatest heroes of the Avengers, Captain America and Iron Man, let their egos get in the way, the ego system versus the ecosystem, in a movie called Civil War. And that led to the enemies gaining greater foothold. Well, what are our enemies in workforce development? Systemic poverty, illiteracy, lack of resources, the inability to provide for their families, the inability to cover expenses such as childcare, the inability to get into those higher paying jobs that will change the lives for their families and the greater community. I'm excited about this panel because we will be starting to engage these leaders on how do we move to an ecosystem where each and every single superhero of the workforce development system are able to leverage their powers together as a team, not in the individual sagas, but as a team. In Star Wars, they took out the evil emperor and Darth Vader. In Lord of the Rings, all of the superheroes took out Sauron, the Dark Lord. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they took out Thanos in the end, but it took all of them working together. In our case, it takes community colleges, secondary level CTE, the apprenticeship system, the WIOA system, in some cases, the university partners, business and industry, and what we're focusing on today, the power and the opportunity that partnering with Title II and adult education providers brings to a comprehensive workforce development superhero system, an ecosystem, not an ecosystem. With that, I'm going to introduce each panelist and they will give you a little bit about their backgrounds one by one. First is Quinlivan, CEO of Futuro Health. Dawnn.
Thank you, Ian, for having me. And thank you so much, Anson and Sharon. What an important set of discussion that we're having. So I'm Dawnn Quinlivan. I'm CEO of Futuro Health. We're a nonprofit established by Kaiser Permanente and SEIU UHW in an unusual alliance to grow the next generation of allied health workers. 65% of the allied health the healthcare workforce are these roles in allied health. They're good jobs. They're local jobs. The Atlanta Federal Reserve and McKinsey had identified that in every single state, this is an important industry and sector to move communities into good jobs. And my background runs the private sector, the public sector with the California community colleges, where I also oversaw the integration of the adult education system in California, and now in the nonprofit sector. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Dawnn. It is an honor to have you on our opening panel this morning. And Laurie, Larrea.
Good morning, Ian. Good morning, everyone. Laurie Bouillion, Larrea. I am the President and CEO of Workforce Solutions Greater Dallas, and that is the Workforce Board for Dallas and Dallas County, and very glad to be here today.
Thank you, Laurie. We are well aware of the great work that you are doing in the Dallas area, and it's an honor to have you on the panel this morning. Next up, we have Dawnn Leary.
Good morning. Just very excited to participate in this conversation and to provide a funding perspective, right, to this conversation about how we get to a unified workforce system. We have to talk about how it's supported financially. So I'm Dawnn Leary with the Greater Washington Community Foundation. We're a community foundation that serves the Greater Washington region, which includes DC, suburban Maryland, and Northern Virginia. And I personally, where I sort of intersect with both issue areas very intimately, is I staff and lead a funding collaborative that's focused on the systemic reasons why our residents are not connecting to employment. And so involved a lot with the workforce system and the adult ed system in our region, and just happy to participate in this conversation.
Dawnn, it's great to have you. And I met Dawnn for the first time the other day virtually, and just great to be having you on this panel, and look forward to working with you in the future. And then finally, least but not last, Dr. Federico Saragosa.
Thank you, Ian, and thank you everybody for this opportunity to talk about the workforce system and adult basic education. But more importantly, I think this is an opportunity to seize the moment and to talk about how the future is going to look like post-COVID. And clearly, this is a panel I think that really is going to have a lot of information to share. So thank you for the opportunity. I'm Federico Saragosa. I am the president for the College of Southern Nevada. Before that, I was the Vice Chancellor for Economic and Workforce Development for the Alamo Colleges in Texas. And before that, I was actually the Dean of Continuing Education at the Milwaukee Area Technical College. So this is an area that's very close to my heart, and I'm looking forward to the conversations.
Wow, what a tremendous wealth of experience and knowledge. And we are so glad, Doctor, that you were able to join our panel as well. Given all of their backgrounds and that superhero analogy, we're going to start with what Anson talked about, the employer perspective. So the first question is for Vaughn. Vaughn, what are the biggest challenges that employers are facing now and will face in the coming years with respect to the workforce development ecosystem?
Well, Ian, you talked about superheroes, and we actually have a superhero-sized challenge when you look at the numbers right now. The numbers are extraordinary. There are 10.9 million open jobs where employers are seeking workers. At the same time, we have 8.4 million unemployed where workers are looking for work. So there's extraordinary friction in the market right now where the two parties can't connect. And we really do need, as you mentioned, an ecosystem collaboration so that we can get all hands on deck, all engines revving. Concurrent to this, we have also other numbers that are very disturbing, where employers cannot rely on past performance or past production of talent. If you look at the numbers from the National Student Clearinghouse, you've seen across the board enrollment drop, roughly about 5% in four-year colleges, but more importantly, I think for this conversation, a roughly 11% drop in community college enrollment, which you wouldn't think would happen because it's a more affordable system. And in California, there's roughly a 20% drop since 2019 enrollment. So even the production of workers that have been coming from these systems, employers need to double check whether that production is going to continue in the way it has in the past. And so, it's easy to transact for talent. If you know that you can put up a posting and there are candidates on the other side, absolutely continue those practices. But if you think you're going to put up a posting and you're not sure, I think they call it post and pray, if you're not sure you have a reliable, quality, and diverse talent pool on the back end, then it's time to put effort into workforce development. And I will acknowledge that workforce development requires minimally time and then some resources. And it is more work than just posting a job. But this is a moment in time where we do need all hands on deck, and we need intentionality to bring all the players together, braid their resources, braid their abilities and their expertise so that we can grow the talent pool and facilitate adults to have the right skills in order to match with these good job opportunities.
I have a follow-up question, Vaughn, on that, based on your initial answer. And there's this mismatch that seems to be ratcheted up increasingly even during and after the pandemic, or as the pandemic winds down in certain locales. And yet we have this decreased enrollment in community colleges. Based on your experience, how can adult education and community colleges better work together to make up for that enrollment loss, number one, on the community college side, but that skills gap alignment piece between the employers and the colleges, and then now including Title II adult education? How can we better do that system-wide?
So it's a very confusing time for our adults right now. If you look at the Strata Consumer Education Studies, they did Gallup polls with adults, and adults are not in the mood to pursue degrees because it's unclear, right? The terrain is unclear. However, they are up for upskilling, attaining skills in shorter bursts in order to move into relevancy. And so I think if we understand that's the need of adults, then all of us need to combine in different ways. Again, it's sort of the ecosystem of willing and who does what best in order to reach out into the community and build their confidence to come back into education in bite size.
And that really speaks to what community colleges have been opening up to even prior to the pandemic, but really expediting it during the course of the pandemic. And so, Dr. Zaragoza, the next question is for you with respect to the role of community colleges in this environment, specific to the inclusion of adult education in partnership with community colleges. What do you think gets in the way of the needed collaboration between the two entities, and how do you overcome those barriers? What are those barriers, and how do you break down those silos?
Yeah, and that's a great question, and one that many of us, I'm sure, have been trying to address for years. I, for one, believe that in spite of all our efforts, we need to really understand that the public and private sectors operate in two very different domains. And the bottom line is that the workforce system is driven by a culture of performance and competition between vendors and training providers. And unfortunately, adult education often is overlooked in the workforce and economic development conversation. Again, I always kind of look at the consequences and the unplanned consequences, and often competition creates silos, and I call them silos of survival, because organizations need to compete and they need to thrive in those environments. So we truly need to rethink the unplanned consequences of the current competitive nature and our policy framework for the whole workforce ecosystem if we truly want to promote collaboration. I think we need to focus on win-win models based on value-added partnerships. And I'll give you an example. In San Antonio, we often formed collaborative projects where community colleges provided training. That was our primary role. That's our core competence. And then we partnered with nonprofit organizations for them to do the recruiting and to provide the case management, elements that they did much better than the community college. And then we brought in employers and employer organizations to help us with the demand-driven engagement and creating the job opportunities and job placement and job readiness element. So we were approaching these challenges from an ecosystem perspective. So to remove silos, we need transformative policy, we need innovation, and we need transformational leadership. And I want to thank Anson for challenging us to go beyond WIOA. And thank you, Ian, for asking us to focus on the collective ecosystem and not the individualistic ecosystem. That resonated with me. I do think, and this will be part of my final observations on this topic or on this question, and I do think that we have to admit that the education and workforce system simply does not know how to effectively engage employers. And I mean this systemically as opposed to individual, because there's a lot of organizations that do it very, very well, but it's the system. I mean, if you look at the literature, we do hear kind of the feedback resonating from us that we do confuse employers, that we do have many moving parts, and that the competitive nature of what we do oftentimes our employers have to serve in many committees, because we have committees at the high school level and we have them at the college level and we have them at the workforce system level. And sometimes it's the same employers that we're taxing it. We're making it very difficult for employers to engage in our work. So it goes back kind of to that need to be thinking about the ecosystem and how we can collectively look at the employers. And the final observation I'll make is looking at the employers and in terms of how we can create wins for employers and not just wins for the public sector system. So I think there's a lot of great opportunities here. This conversation really is one that's gonna lead us to think about, what is it that we need to do collectively rather than as the individual ecosystem that was already mentioned, Ian. Thank you.
Absolutely, Dr. Zaragoza. What in your experience, whether it's in Texas or Nevada or elsewhere that you've observed, is there a place where the community college, the workforce system, and Title II adult ed have really partnered well together to decrease the number of outreach from individual entities, but have done so more as a collective or more as a team? What example perhaps comes to mind?
Ian, I think we've got a lot of, again, project-based pockets of excellence where we've seen that happen. I mentioned San Antonio, but I think everywhere you've had strong sector initiatives, there's been on the supply side a lot of collaboration, and oftentimes looking at employers as a sector. And not only as a sector, but also employer size. I think that the employers that have the least capacity to work with us because of our, I'll use the term inefficiency, are the small employers, small and medium employers, because they just don't have the resources to allocate to kind of make those connections. I think the sectoral approaches have been very effective in terms of kind of creating a systemic approach to employers that are very specific to a sector need. And I think that model could work in other areas, especially if we look at this much more from employer perspective and kind of move away from kind of the performance competition perspective that often drives a lot of our grants.
Well, that is very well said in terms of industry-driven sector partnerships versus, I think you phrased it as a vendor and provider space of competition, and really just appreciate those two different models and framing that way, Dr. Zaragoza. Laurie, from your perspective, as a workforce board leader, why do employers, colleges, and local workforce development boards need to bring adult ed programs to the table in this potentially competitive space? Why do we not see more IBEST programs or integrated education training programs at scale, and what can we do about it?
Love answering this one. And I love the backdrop of the Marvel studio. All of us have to come together with our superpowers. No one of us can do it alone. Thanks to Anson for inviting us, but also for being a part of the Texas model. And you've heard San Antonio's story. Here in Dallas, we formed the collaborative effort, and I mean true consortium. The workforce board leads. We have the community college, Work Ready U, doing an amazing part, 2 ISDs, and a nonprofit organization, all working together through the one-stop centers, through the American Job Centers. This is seamless. It is expressive of the problem for the job seeker and the problem for the employer. We've been at it 7 years. I can't think of a better environment than now to pivot all systems across America to that holistic approach to training the workforce. We don't have enough people, as Van said. There's so many jobs going wanting in the Dallas market. But something we have to realize is the job seeker, the worker, can't give up what they have to get what they need. We have to meet them halfway. So we've gone into the employers. Great support. And just for educators, know what the support is. We have the supporting of our city mayors, county judges for the workforce system, and 51% of our board are the employers. So we have that voice that pushed us out there to say we can do this at the workplace. We've worked with over 50 employers. Even during COVID, we were successful with 70 cohorts for our training, our career pathways, everything from billing, medical billing and coding, construction, entrepreneurial focus. This went on. So working as a team, all merging our superpowers was the only way to do this. And so I appreciate that lift. We also believe in the aspirational hire. I am emphatic with employers. You're not going to get someone that has all the pieces. You have to get people, and then you have to support them. A professional development starts with every worker, and this is a part of it. We'll come to them. One of our mayors was very creative. He gathered hotel motel industry and said, you know, it would really help. Why don't you pay them for that hour of training? We'll come to you. We'll brown bag it. You pay them that extra hour. And that's something that I don't think we often think we can ask for. But this is economic development. This is investment in workforce. And the aspirational hire who is helped by the employer probably will stick around a lot longer than the person who comes in who has all the tools, all the capabilities. We've also embarked on a project. We're doing a lot of high school diploma. We're doing them online. We've made that work. It's more popular in our community than a GED. We've also done a lot of online learning, particularly things like a retail certificate. We work with the Retail Pays program that we run with Walmart. A lot of private funding has come into this. I will say the challenge, I think, right now is to turn this very large ship of workforce, public ed, adult ed. But we believe that you've got to separate the vision. People have got to look at this as a supply chain of workers, not a part of public ed. And I think that's why our community college called this practice Work Ready U. So it's a university of becoming work ready as opposed to adult ed. And there's a lot of merit in the naming. There's a lot of merit in the marketing, as Selena can tell you. The marketing of it has been very special for us. We're very happy with our consortium. We will keep it going. I will tell you, one of our school districts was just brilliant. Irving ISD, they decided to start in-house. So they went to their workers, their bus drivers, their kitchen help, their maintenance staff, and said, do you want an education? Do you want English skills? They started there. Then they could show other employers in their community. We did it first. We did it inside. Can we come and do it inside for you? Behaving as an employer makes a big difference. And our team has been impactful. I won't say that we've helped every employer, but we've engaged over 55 that we've gone into their facilities to train. But I think having the workforce board lead was a Texas conversation for many years. Set the stage that this is economic development and workforce development. COVID gave us a hard shot, very hard to keep people learning technology, learning. Oh, it's tough, especially for our non-English speaking, for those who are challenged already. So we've now blended all of our tech schools with a little bit more of that deep touch. Come in, visit with us, or let's do a one-on-one Zoom. Let us help you get past whatever impediment. But I think it's important that we realize people need help on both sides. Our employers are drowning without the workforce they need, and our workers need this extra effort on our part.
Thank you, Laurie. That was very insightful, and you had a lot of examples there. The Irving school district example is really speaks to me, because that's leading, that's walking the talk, and taking care of their own workforce internally as an example. Have you seen among the employers on your board or among employers in your community how the behavior and the practices of one employer or a sector influenced another to follow along and invest more in workforce development or adult education and collaborate accordingly?
Definitely. Over our 20 years of sector strategies, we've had very good luck in blending tech training, perhaps with some adult skills, aerospace, medical specifically, giving people this strong foundation of the necessary background to be in medical coding at Methodist Hospital. A lot of this is done through our community college, but I will tell you, the collaboration is seamless. The community does not have to know which one is touching what. We make it that you go to the college, then you get everyone's attention as you need it. Also, we've infused the program with adult education, the adult dollars from workforce to pay for the skills training in some cases. So, and the college has gone after national grants. We have a huge apprenticeship grant this year, $10 million. And we have also gone after state grants, and Texas makes it work. We have a lot of resources here.
Thank you very much, Laurie. This next question is first directed to Dawnn, and then anybody else who wants to chime in on the panel, because Dr. Zaragoza said it well, that the pockets of excellence are good where that excellence is occurring, but what about the systemic or the policy change? So Dawnn, this is the policy question. What policy changes need to occur at the state or national level to further incentivize the inclusion of all adult education and all of these other providers into a comprehensive approach to workforce development, to move beyond that competitive vendor-based schematic that Dr. Zaragoza outlined in his initial response?
Well, I know my colleagues on this panel here will go into the specifics about the adult ed system, but I just want to take this question from a slightly different angle. When I was heading up workforce development in the private sector, I was under the erroneous impression that there were no resources out there, that my company was on its own. And then when I moved into the public sector as vice chancellor of the largest system of higher education, which is the California community colleges, I was shocked at the volume of resources that was out there. And as Dr. Zaragoza talked about, there was such competition between institutions. You know, each adult ed provider, all the community colleges, they were holding curriculum to their chest. They played as if they were the only entity in town, right? So what I would say is, if we want collaboration, and for all the policymakers in the room here, if you want an ecosystem of the willing to work together to braid their resources, that collaboration has to be designed in public policy, right? So I'll just give you a case in point. So when I first started my job as vice chancellor previously, I asked, well, you know, these career education programs are very expensive, right? So why is it that all the colleges keep competing against each other? The students are within driving distance. Couldn't we coordinate our capacity? They said, no, the state pays us to compete against each other. Now think about that statement. The state pays us to compete against each other, which means that, you know, as a system office, we were releasing RFPs, RFA that said, you know, we're going to have the best and best winner throughout the state. And what we designed was basically for them to compete against each other. So instead, you know, that statement caused us to rethink how the money flowed. And instead, what we wanted was regions of California to compete against each other. Yes, LA should compete against the Bay Area, right? San Francisco Bay Area, that's a perfect competition. But within that geography, within LA or within Orange County, for example, the 9 colleges of Orange County should play together. The 10 community colleges of San Diego should play together. The 28 community colleges of the San Francisco Bay Area should play together. How powerful is that in terms of resources for the employers? And it's easier for the employers to step up when it's a coordinated effort, when it's the capacity of the region being parlayed, rather than having to go, as someone has said, you know, one advisory board at a time. And so once you design a public policy to say, okay, if we can get the colleges of the regions to play together and coordinate their capacity, then you can also then append, here's the K-12 feeders, here's the adult education connection, and the employer connection, the WIB connection. And it has been done. That playbook has been proven, played out in California, and happy to share more of it. But if you take a look at the Strong Workforce Program, which was then encoded into legislation in California, because we started playing together and designing policies where we were cultivating and designing this collaboration, the governor and the legislature put a lot of resources. You know, previously we had like maybe 50 million at most, you know, one occurring money. After we created this type of regional policy, then the state put 200 million a year, that's like $1 billion in 5 years, right? Behind this type of public policy, and began connecting all the systems much more systematically. So that's a key point. And then secondly, just as a quick infomercial on to the National Skills Coalition, the Marco Rework Alliance, and Aspen Upskill, all 3 of these major coalitions are all working on digital skills as the basic skills, as the new basic skills, as well as digital infrastructure. because from a public policy point of view, without these types of skill sets pervasive, we still have nots in our economy.
Thank you so much, Vaughn. To any other of the panelists, any additional insights on federal or state level policy before we get into a specific funding dialogue? With that, Dawnn, I really think that Vaughn teed it up nicely for you with respect to the outcome pretty much of all of the policy, which is at some point, it speaks to the dollar and where it goes. And you are a key player in the funding ecosystem within your area. And oftentimes people are coming to your organization after the end of what they perceive all of these other resources have dried up from at least their perspective. So how does funding fit into this overall perspective and from the perspective of a major funder?
Yeah, and so it's just great to be on this panel, and I feel like my fellow panelists hit on all the points that I was really going to lift up, and so I'll just sort of reiterate them, because oftentimes when we talk about workforce and adult ed, in this case, coming together, or we talk about an ecosystem as a whole, then the funding community, and when I say funding community, I don't even mean just private philanthropy, I also mean state and federal governments. We perpetuate barriers and we don't encourage collaboration monetarily. So we tend to, as an example, maybe fund the lead partner or the job training side. We value that more. And so we give more on that part of the ecosystem or the continuum. And therefore sort of disincentivize folks from reaching out to adult ed. And organizations have to do, I call it sort of their ROI, as they're identifying, what resources I'm going to go after, who am I going to work with? And if there's not the resources to really support their part of the work, then they're not going to work alongside, they're not going to reach beyond the aisle, right? They're not going to reach out to the workforce system. The workforce system is not going to reach out to them. And we as funders are a huge perpetuator of division and competition. And so then we have to like walk our walk, and that has to be reflected in the RFPs that we put together, of not valuing each part of the ecosystem, not only one aspect of the ecosystem, not only asking groups to speak to it on the narrative, but asking it to be reflected in the budget. I think the other kind of element that I sort of heard even in my fellow panelists is funders need to understand the real cost of doing this work. We're talking about people, not widgets, right? People who have lives and families and aspirations. And we're asking community colleges and CBOs and nonprofits to be flexible. Well, if we're asking them to be flexible, then we also need to be flexible in the dollars that we're giving them to support the work, because they're going to need to course correct and be nimble. And as they're learning and working with learners on the ground in terms of what they need and where they're at, a lot of like the requirements that we have as funders sometimes is we put more constraints on the organizations that are doing the work. So we also have to be nimble and flexible. And the other kind of element that sort of spoke to me is that how does government and private philanthropy really work together as it relates to this ecosystem? So we have our superpowers too as funders. Government have a set of skills and as it relates to as a funding partner that are important to this fight. And so is private philanthropy. And we need to understand what those strengths are, and then how we then come together to like create, fund the full ecosystem more comprehensively and more effectively. And that really is a challenge. There often is sort of sometimes a barrier or a disconnect between government as funders and private philanthropy as funders, and sometimes kind of looking back at each other saying, you don't understand, rather than recognizing that we both have strengths. And if we're going to get at these challenges and issues our ecosystem is facing from becoming an ecosystem, then we're going to have to talk across the lines. And we're going to have to recognize each other's strengths and see how we can be additive rather than one duplicative and creating barriers. And so those are just some I've heard I want to open up for questions and don't want to belabor, but those are some things that I really feel that as it relates to the funding equation in this, that are common sense, but we're not doing them well. And so that were important to lift up.
No, Dawn, those are key points about how even private funders and private philanthropy and public funding needs to even be better coordinated based on each other's superpowers. Does a specific, whether it's from the Greater Washington Community Foundation perspective or another entity that you're familiar with, are you aware of any particular project related to workforce development or education that could perhaps be an example to look at or a model?
Yeah, I think there are different ways in which the public system and the private philanthropy have supported adult ed and workforce project related, where maybe the government dollars are funding one aspect of that project, where private philanthropy comes in on the back end and maybe provides more of the flexibility that government can't provide. But I do think that there is a larger conversation we're not having, and that goes beyond, I think, Dr. Federico sort of spoke to it around from the systems level. There's a funding systems challenge we're having in this conversation that I think we need to start having, rather than we immediately go to a project or a program and to say, hey, let's focus here. But groups are still struggling if they get beyond that project with some of the same challenges and barriers we're creating as funders around how we're really valuing partnership versus the way we should be valuing partnership. So I guess I'll say, Ian, that I just feel like there is an element of the funding conversation that we're not having as a system that I think we need to finally start having.
That's very, very well said. And thank you for that point, Dawn. We are going to open up to some questions. There are a lot of feedback going on in the chat and a lot of engagement, and it's so welcome and valued. We won't have time to get to every single question, so thank you to Laurie Kierstead-Joseph for pulling out some into a separate screen for me to look at and ask. So one that was pulled out was, can the speakers, can we really talk about job quality? It's not something we've actually spoken about in any of the responses, and what role can we have in promoting standards? And I'll add my own little tidbit to it as a vice president of workforce development. How do we have those conversations as providers, as participants in the workforce system without castigating employers or even coming across like we are with respect to that job quality? So let's have a brief conversation about job quality and our role and how to approach that.
Since we're having a problem getting enough people into jobs, I'll just start with wages are no longer the conversation. I will quote an executive who said the talent war is over and talent won. We're at 15 to start with. And I mean, you've got, some retailers at 22 in our market. It's crazy. But I think what we've noticed now, it isn't the wage, it is the environment, it is the partnership, the teamwork, how someone feels in that ecosystem of the employer, and whether or not they want to be a part of that team. People want that comfort level. So they're coming from all directions. Quality is not just what we may have thought it was 5 years ago. Quality is now this composition that each of us have experienced in our work. You choose to work somewhere not only for the money, but the benefits, but the colleagues, but the common cause. And so I think when we talk about quality in work, it's different for everyone. And we're noticing that people don't take the job that we would thought most likely. They will take the job that is more comfortable. And so getting employers to understand that, because employers are very angry at the people who, quote, do not want to accept a job. That's not the point. People want to accept the job that they would be comfortable with. And I think that's something that all of us need to recognize and appreciate and then facilitate, especially the employer side of understanding it.
That's very helpful, Laurie. What any other insights into the job quality piece? Dr. Zaragoza.
Yeah, Ian, That's in some ways, it's kind of like a loaded question because, I really do think that we talk about employers if that they were a homogeneous group and they're so diverse by sector, by size, and even, if you look at kind of the equity, the minority and small business sector that's out there, and they all have kind of different opportunities. And I think we have to do a much better job of connecting the right employer to our collaborative efforts. There are many opportunities where you might connect an employer, in an internship kind of component, not necessarily on the placement side or on the mentorship side, to keep them in the programs. So I think it's really important that we, again, really rethink, employer engagement. It needs to occur at every phase. And then the alignment and the matching needs to be there, or we're going to have a lot of frustrated employers, especially those that I think may not have the deep pockets that some of the mid and large employers have, but that are very much a part of our ecosystem. In some of my communities, minority small business employers are struggling to survive, but they've got jobs, and we need to be working with them as well. There's a place for them in this whole process. And I think the pathways kind of models are critical for us to understand that, the first job, all of us had a first job, and the first job that we had, I'm sure wasn't the last job that we had in terms of quality. I think it's important that again, we truly understand employers and the diversity of the employer community and how they can enrich our education and workforce delivery systems.
So that's a great point with respect to the range of employer engagement in equally perhaps the range of workforce systems, adult ed providers and community colleges with their responsiveness to said employers. Real brief on this topic. We at Pima Community College were participants in the Opportunity America survey that went out nationally with respect to employer engagement. And we learned a lot through that process about how we even classified and quantified the different levels of employer engagement with our own institution. And across the board, it was those employers who were more engaged and those that we engaged with more were more satisfied with the relationship at the end and more satisfied with the quality and the skills of the learners and graduates of our various programs. And it was a lesson learned both ways. And so therefore, the Tucson Metro Chamber of Commerce in Pima County is now celebrating and giving annual recognition and awards to employers who give scholarships, who have robust tuition reimbursement regimen, who engage in work-based learning practices on a routine basis, and so on and so forth. And so I think that was really, really well said and just a lesson learned in both directions. There are some questions here related to ATB and also for increasing community college and connecting to career pathways. So I'm going to ask a couple of those. A shout out to Regina Suit, a longtime former colleague and still friend. Regina is an amazing leader in the adult ed community, and just appreciate some of these questions coming from her. So are colleges utilizing ability to benefit for increasing college enrollment and connecting to career pathways? If not, what are some of the barriers there? And then are employers working with community colleges for on-the-job training, supportive services, and what are some successes? So I know those are slightly two different questions, but we'll put them on the table. Ability to benefit and or on-the-job training and supporting services, or a combination of both.
Ian, if I could, because just yesterday we had a press conference where we announced that Bank of America was going to make a gift of $100,000 specifically to cover the cost of the 6 credits that are part of the ability to benefit model to create bridges into basically non-credit to credit migration. And I think there's great opportunities. And I can tell you that at CSN, one of the reasons that we did not see the significant declining enrollment was because early on, I recognized that we had 1,000 students at any given time in the GED pipeline, but they're not being connected basically to the pathways on the credit side. And oftentimes it's an underutilized resource that systemically we need to link. So I can tell you that at the College of Southern Nevada, we're doing both cohort-based ability to benefit, where we've got programs in air conditioning and diesel, and I believe in another one of the traits areas, but we're also doing migration to basically slotting into programs, any program, by completing those 6 credits as part of a bridge from the GED into the college matriculation. And I use the example of what we're doing with dual credit in the high schools, for high school students basically earning college credit and connecting to the pathways. That model is what ability to benefit looks like at the systems level. And again, I'm emphasizing the systemic approach and not just a project approach. So I'm really challenging us to really create entry points for those 1,000 students that are in my GD system, and to get them into basically ability to benefit as that bridge.
So that really is an example of the last question we are going to have before I have some brief closing remarks. And that is what you spoke about of really looking at ability to benefit is a way to deliver dual credit to the adult population who do not yet have high school equivalencies. Really a fantastic example of an innovation. To all of you, what other innovations do you see coming out that aren't just those one-off examples of excellence, but really are systemic level innovations that, if scaled, you are really excited about in meeting these learners' needs? Any final examples on innovation?
Ian, since I had the mic open, I'll just go quickly. We are working in a lot of private money right now, and a couple of things that came up. Please don't always think about using every tool in the case. OJT is not necessary right now. It's about solving the problem, not spending all of our funds and not dinging all the bells in the funding cycle. And to Dawnn, we strongly believe that private money teaches public money how to behave if done right, and that we need more policy influence from the experiences. So 5 or 6 workforce boards in the nation are now working with an X-Prize model through New Profit. And we are one of those boards. And it's been amazing to solve the problem, bring technological advances to the delivery of our system, not necessarily delivering the program that is specified. So I'm trying to bleed that out of the workforce system. Let's not talk about all these little nits like an OJT and a work experience and a whatever. Let's get down to the core situation, fix the problem, whatever that takes. If you leave money on the table, give it back. It's okay.
Fantastic. Well, to all of you, to Dawnn, to Laurie, to Vaughn, to Dr. Zaragoza, just thank you so much for being a part of our opening panel today with Intersect. You have really spoken to the challenge of how do we stop acting and behaving and perpetuating these silos and really breaking them down at a systemic level, at a funding level, at a partnership level, and really leading by the examples we do in our work in each and every single day. Thank you to all of the participants and to COABE. We look forward to many excellent sessions throughout the rest of the day that will continue to answer some of the questions we didn't even get to in this session. Remember, we all have a superpower. We need to bring it to the table with the best of our ability, but more importantly, with the best of our intent. We have a higher purpose with respect to workforce education, development training, and adult education in our communities. And that is to have all of our community members have the opportunity for gainful employment, upward mobility, and a greater purpose in life as we move forward out of the challenges that this pandemic has brought to all of us. Thank you for the work that each and every single one of you do. Thank you for the work of COABE as a part of this ecosystem, and we look forward to the work ahead.